they were doing like autopsies, and you could see surgeries where they would go into someone's brain and there'd be actually mushrooms.
My name is Michael Rubino. I'm on a personal mission to make sure you don't get sick inside your own home.
I knew there was something wrong. I'm just so relieved there's something that you can do about it.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Never Been Sicker. I'm your host, Michael Rubino, and today's very special, amazing guest, Dr. Christina Rahm. Dr. Christina Rahm, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to be here with us.
Thank you so much for having me on the call. I've heard a lot about you, and it's amazing what you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. So obviously the podcast is called Never Been Sicker. And, you know, I talk a lot about how air quality could be the missing link for better health. But I want to hear from you. You know, what's your health journey been like? What have you been through, and what can we learn from that?
When I was younger, I actually had lots of allergies. I grew up on a farm, so there's lots of pesticides, lots of mold, lots of things going on when you grow up on a farm. Even like on one side of my family, they were tobacco farmers, and not to get into too much detail about this, but even like on tobacco plants in the leaf, you can have mold, right? So then you're eating it and you're around it. And so when you're touching all these farming things, you're exposed to so much, right? And you don't think about, well, you're putting pesticides and getting rid of any insect, but you're also hurting animals and you're also hurting human beings. And through that, I became very interested in science. I really researched a lot. I was very interested growing up on a farm on human animal health, as well as environmental health, to be honest. And I was very sick, but I had a great life. I enjoyed going to college, was in a sorority, having fun, really enjoying every second, not paying attention to that something bad could happen, and I got Lyme's disease. And for me as a scientist, I understand that spiral sheets and Lyme disease can actually breed in mold and fungus, and I have always been predisposed. And yes, that is a thing. Scientifically, you can be predisposed to fungus in your body, and it can proliferate, right? And so as a young kid, this was always an issue. It's kind of, my whole family has had this issue. So when I got Lyme's disease, I started understanding and really researching the spiral sheets and how they grow. And at the time, I'm a lot older than you. And so at the time when this happened, it was new. Like I actually was on a podcast with Maria Menounos. I never say her name right. I have a little bit of a speech impediment. She's an amazing person. She and I were one of the first 2 cases of Lyme's disease. She was younger than I was, but we both had reported cases about us that were written by a lot of doctors. Both of us later got brain tumors, which is not a secret. Like, we both have had different types of tumors from that. But I really believe that having a combination of growing up, being around a lot of toxins and pesticide and mold, and then having this predisposition, and then getting Lyme's disease, just that whole cascade led to me getting sick later and being pregnant with a child and getting cancer, losing a child, having another child with cancer, and then also having a prolactinoma, pituitary tumor, squamous, basal, melanoma, all kinds of cancer throughout my body that proliferated. And I think it was just a cycle effect with all the things that were happening. And I do think that mold, along with heavy metals and toxins and environmental triggers, caused this to keep happening in my life. And most people understand that once you have cancer, once you have Lyme disease, once you are associated with certain things like this, it doesn't go away. You can go into remission, but cancer cells talk, sick cells talk. Parasites breed in fungus. I mean, I could go on and on. The whole cascade, for me, it drew me to a life's work of really understanding it wasn't just about money. It's not about power. It's about humanity. And how do we clean up our environment? How do we clean up our lives so we can have healthier lives? So by getting this sentence of Lyme disease and then of cancer, for me, it was not, I'm going to die. It was simply, I'm going to live, and how am I going to live? And what am I going to do about it? Because I understood that one doctor was not going to determine my life. I understood that I was an intelligent human being like all of us are, and I was going to use my scientific background to create solutions to help people. But I got to tell you, probably one of my biggest I would say privileges has been to really study and learn about different types of viruses, bacteria, fungus, mold, and then to understand it. Like I understood, if anyone heard me talk during podcast when the pandemic happened, I've traveled to 92 countries, I've worked with governments. I wasn't as worried about the pandemic as I was worried about fungus and mold and parasites, because I understood that once you had a virus that proliferated and mutated, that then your fungus grows. So while everyone was worried about that in the scientific community, we were seeing different types of fungus and mold and parasites we had never seen because they were mutating, right? So everything was in this cascade. And it really does go back to my personal health. I think if I would not have gotten sick, if I would not have lost a child, if I didn't have another child with cancer, this would not have been a personal journey for me in this way. But because that happened to me, it caused me to really focus on this as a scientist and to come up with different solutions that we could roll out throughout the world.
First off, I'm so sorry to hear about all the stuff that you've been through. I mean, I can't believe, what you've gone through and how you're still here and you've prevailed, and you're not only prevailed, but you're making this your life's mission to help others. I mean, it's not easy to go through what you're going through. I've had family recently just diagnosed with cancer. We found mold in their house, and we're actively working on trying to help them. It's unfortunately one of those things where people aren't connecting the dots so quickly as you've alluded to. And I have to ask, what are these dots that we need to start connecting, right? You've mentioned heavy metals, you've mentioned mold, you've mentioned pesticides, you've mentioned parasites. And so, and of course, viruses, and we already know, somewhat about viruses and bacteria, but some of these other things are pretty much unknown to, I would say, most of the population. What seems to be the connection here that you're seeing?
So I think there's two scientists, Rex and Ronalde, that really focused on a lot of fungal infections. And I was at one point in the pharmaceutical biotech industry. I was at Pfizer. We had a project at Camp Pendleton and different things that we were working on. And I say the luxury because I really look at this as a gift. It was kind of an aha moment for me. Here I am getting into the pharmaceutical industry and research only because I'm trying to figure out, like, how do we fix some of this stuff that's happening? Because I really truly believed that cancer didn't need to be a death sentence, that there were other issues around it that were environmental triggers like bacteria or mold or parasites causing these cancer cells to grow. And because I was at one of the top pharmaceutical companies at the time, I was on a project where I got to experience some of the surgeries and some of the things they were doing for fungal infections. They had launched fluconazole, which is diflucan, and we were studying what would happen when someone got a bacterial or viral infection from like you can get a bacterial or viral infection from like a thorn bush, right? Or from a bird that uses a bathroom and you touch the bird's feces. You can actually get certain types of toxins from that, even fungal infections from that, right? And 50% to 80% of the time, it was misdiagnosed, because when you give someone a fungal test, it used to have a 50% negative, 50% positive, which meant you weren't getting an accurate reading. So when a patient would go to a doctor, they could test for bacteria. They could test for viruses. They weren't really testing for parasites and fungals if you look back 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Now, when you see a commercial on television for the pharmaceutical companies, you'll notice, if you pay attention, they're saying, let your doctor know if you have a fungal infection. Let your doctor know if you have a parasitic infection. If you go back, that never used to happen. Those dots were not connected. They may have been connected in like Nigeria, right, or Ghana, which, again, I've had the luxury of working with doctors in those countries as well, where they are very well informed on fungus and parasites. In the United States, we were more worried about the diagnosis and not what caused the diagnosis, right? But my personality has never been that way. My mother said I used to ask why 1,000 ways every day. And she'd be like, please stop asking me why. I wanted to know why. And it really hit me in my 20s when I got to work with and really do an internship. It was called a preceptorship under Rex and Rinaldi. They were doing like autopsies, and you could see surgeries where they would go into someone's brain and there'd be actually mushrooms growing out, or mushrooms and fungus in the body. And I got to see that. I got to see it on research slides. I got to understand it. I remember one preceptorship that I did when I was in the pharmaceutical industry where I trained with doctors, and I was told up to 50% of the people in a morgue that have died actually died from a fungal infection and not why they came into the hospital. Because what would happen is your bacterial load would go up or your virus would go up. You'd have a high fever, and they didn't realize that maybe they were treating with an antibiotic, but they hadn't treated with an antifungal. And the fungus was growing because it's a cycle. In this body, you have this world that's living. It's a city. And once one thing gets off kilter, it causes the other things to grow and mutate. And so it was really something I felt like the dots weren't connected. Like, even though I'm working at this amazing company, no one's like connecting the dots. Yeah, maybe you're connecting the dots to sell a prescription or for doctors to understand, but what about the whole continuum of the environment inside and what's occurring? What is the cause of it? Like back then, those doctors understood you could get mold from the air. The fungus could grow, that could cause it. I mean, even your air quality on the inside of your house, the water, travel, I could go on and on. And I have to tell you, I've always been one of those people when I'm outside, I'm looking to see if there's mold on a building, right? If I see the black mold or if I know what's going on, because I understand that whoever's in that building is having health issues that they probably don't understand have something to do with mold, because it's part of that inflammatory cascade that's really causing the body to deteriorate. And I say this to people all the time, your body is a host for a city. It's a living, breathing city. And if that body inside gets mold or parasites, and parasites, by the way, breed in that mold or in that fungus. We know that, like Alzheimer's, cognitive functioning, that when you do autopsies, you see a lot of fungus and mold, right? It's not just an ApoE gene. There's other kinds of environmental triggers that are causing it. So again, this has been, 20 plus years ago of my life where I realized, at first I was angry. I'm like, why aren't people talking about this? Why aren't the doctors connecting the dots when people come in with cancer or autoimmune disorder or something, and no one's even talking about it? Yes, they may be talking about you have, excuse me for saying this, but jock itch, or you have a yeast infection as a female, but they're not talking about, that's all they're talking about. They're not talking about everything else and then how it plays into your overall health. And so instead of just staying angry, I didn't want to live in anger and bitterness my whole life because of people not understanding. It became my mission. Honestly, I'm a mother of 4. So it became my mission to explain this to other mothers and fathers and to other people so they would understand. So even though I understood that a healthcare system or a doctor or a government wasn't going to solve this, I felt like individual people deserve the knowledge to know. Not everyone can understand and accept that knowledge, and I get that. But I think for the people that really want to understand what's going on in their body, they deserve the right to know what could have caused an illness or a disease. And so that's how I started really working on patents and formulations and really everything from pharmaceutical to biologics, but really focusing more on natural things because I didn't want the side effects. Because even the side effects, the reason they're saying this when you read the ads that are on television or you see the commercials, is if you're giving like a biologic or certain types of vaccines or certain types of human monoclonal antibodies or pharmaceuticals, it can make a fungus spread or a mold spread or the parasites get worse, right? So that can be a potential side effect. And so for me, just understanding all of that became my mission to really try to figure out solutions. And of course, I can't figure out all the solutions. I'm just trying to figure out as many as I can while I'm alive on this earth, is how we can help people. So they deserve, I feel like they deserve to know that fungus can overtake your body, that parasites can live inside. When you say animals have parasites in the United States, why wouldn't we understand that we have worms and parasites? And why do people not know that if you have a fungal infection, it makes it worse? And again, the reason is because none of us have been told that. And we have to learn that together and educate ourselves, because I don't think one entity or one healthcare system or one government is going to do that for us.
First off, I so appreciate you and everything you've been doing, to make this topic that's not really up in people's forefront of their minds, to make people more aware of it, because it's really important. So, give a little bit of a background story on me. I'm entering my 13th year of my career, and my career happens to be around indoor air quality and fixing people's homes that have been, in some way in some sort of disrepair. And I actually started to get introduced to this entire idea right after Hurricane Sandy swept the Northeast, and there was thousands and thousands of homes that had disrepair, and a lot of these people were complaining of illness. And for me, I was in my 20s at the time. I would have never connected dots that a home that somebody lives in could make them sick. It was a totally foreign concept to me, but there was a pattern that I noticed. I would knock on doors and people had different symptoms, but they were the same common theme was, I don't feel well, right? And I started to really take a notice to this pattern, and I started to say, well, I believe them. I mean, there's no reason for them not to feel the way they feel, and they would all say the same thing. When I'm away from this house, I feel great. Yeah. When I enter this house, I don't feel good. And so I started to look at the lab reports. I started to notice this pattern of, toxic levels of mold inside people's homes, and they were getting distributed throughout their HVAC systems, and it was affecting what they're breathing. And of course, the three things that I had to learn at the time was you have the spores and the fragments of the mold, you have the mycotoxins that it produces, right? And you've got the MVOCs that also are a part of the puzzle when the mold is actually feeding off the building materials. And so, I didn't really know. I'm not a doctor, right? I didn't really know which piece of this was affecting them. I just knew that we had to get rid of all of it, right? Yeah. And so I started to figure out and test, and through time, develop the process of how do we remove this from people. First off, how do we identify it in people's houses? Because that is like the wild, wild west, right? Yeah. Then how do we then rectify this in people's homes? And how do we validate that it's actually gone, right? And so throughout this 13-year journey, I've been obsessed with just helping people create healthy environments and doing it through science and the testing technologies that we have to identify and repair the problems and then validate that they're gone. But I will tell you, across these 13 years, the one thing for sure that I have seen is that when people have clean houses, they just seem to thrive. Yeah. They feel better. The symptoms that are either getting, lessened in intensity, or they're completely blown. I can tell you miraculous stories of people that were bedbound with GJ feeding tubes in their lower intestine, essentially giving them nutrients to keep them alive, to like 7 days later, they're completely back to normal and they're eating again and they're walking again. Crazy stuff, right? But I would say for the past 13 years, I've been really shouting this from a mountaintop, and, there's been some skepticism, right? And I think the way I look at it is that, in America especially, we've been kind of indoctrinated to this system where if you've got an issue, you take a pill for that. That's what health is, right? It's these pills that you need to take when you sometimes get unlucky enough to need to take them. And, it's for me, it's been such an uphill battle getting people to understand, health is actually about the air you're breathing. It's about the food you're eating and the water you're drinking. That's the foundation for health. Yeah. But it seems to be that it's so simple that people are can't get their head wrapped around it. Yeah. I'd love to explore your opinion on, why you think we've had such societal difficulties getting this message across, because you've been shouting this message far longer than I have. And I think the nice thing about it is, on the flip side of that, we are seeing some level of awareness really growing. RFK Jr. just the other day said, hey, first thing we're looking at in terms of autism is mold, right? I mean, really inspiring to see, a government official
Yeah.
use the word mold. It's been like, oh my God, I've been waiting for this, right? And so would just love to hear some of your insights regarding those two things.
Yeah. When you get into a political position, and I do some things with different governments, as I stated, sometimes you can't say everything you want to say, but he's doing a good job of really trying to bring up discussion points that we should already know, right? And if you ask me, do other doctors and scientists know this? I don't know, because here's what I honestly think. I think that, you go to school, you study stuff, you don't learn everything in school. I just want to say that, like, my first master's was in science, and then my first doctorate degree was counseling and psychology. And I remember I had done internships, but I'm thrown out into the world to diagnose if someone is schizophrenic or bipolar and what they need. Do they need to be hospitalized or do they not? And I was like, wait a minute, even though I had been in school and had done oral and written comps and testing, I wasn't prepared. And so what that did with my personality, and if you think about it, back then I was seeing sometimes 40 patients in community mental health a day. How do you see 40 patients and diagnose them and then continue to learn? Right. And because you're not learning everything in school, like, even though you may not have a formal education in science, that doesn't mean you're not a scientist, or that doesn't mean you can't learn, especially in today's society when you can really research things on the internet and really do a deep dive. For doctors and scientists, they go to school to study a certain thing. And unless they have probably a mission or a passion, which I did because of what I personally had gone through in my family, you don't just keep going back to school or learning because you already have that certification and diploma, right? And for me, it wasn't even enough that I learned just in the United States. I've been actually criticized for part of my education because it was in Africa. Like, I did things in Africa. I did things in South Africa and Asia and in Europe because I didn't want to just have a Western education where I learned from a textbook at a school and took a test. I wanted to develop things and help humanity. When you reach a level sometimes there's even me with certain things I do, my hands are tied. But for this topic, this is such a important topic in my mind for the whole world to understand, that it's something I have been talking about for 20 plus years, just making sure people are educated. And I love what you said about the air, and I want to tell you this. I need to look this up, but I have a slide deck I actually presented to the government at one point on the air quality and what was happening with COPD. And mostly it was caused by indoor air and not outdoor air. And I did this whole presentation, and I actually even did it at one point for the union workers for workers' comp, trying to explain to them how they could cut back on lost days due to like fungus and mold and stuff in the air, right? So I did this whole presentation. And, people sometimes look at me like I'm crazy, but then when you present the NIH, PubMed, and research data along with that, you make some progress. But until you have different government officials standing up and saying this, then you're not going, and healthcare professionals, right, that are in a level where people are listening to them, you won't make as many changes. For me, Kennedy's remark about autism, he understands because of what his family's gone through and what he's studied, right? He is very accurate in that opinion. I always say this, it's environmental toxins that are causing this, and those are passed on from the mother to the baby. So heavy metals, for example, if you have mercury and arsenic, and we know what just happened in California, and lead in your body, I'm sure you know this, the heavy metals, the mold grows, right? And I'm not trying to be an alarmist. I don't want people to be scared. There are solutions to different things. When people ask me, I say constantly, the air and water quality inside your home is those are two of the most important things. So when people ask me steps that I've taken, I'm filtrating the heck out of everything, because for me, one filtration system is not enough. One test is not enough. And because I understand as a scientist that you can have fungus or mold and have a false it can show negative, right? But you actually have it, because some of it, if it's a new type of spore or if it has a new specificity, you don't have an assay that will diagnose that. So, like, for example, now, because of the pandemic, we have all these different strains of fungus we never knew about. How are we testing for that? We don't always have accurate tests, but what we do know, let's lean on what we know, right? We know there's mold and fungus inside homes and outside homes. We know that inside the homes, it's trapped, right? So let's talk about that. The air quality, it's trapped, it's stagnant, it's all around you. That's why there's so many issues that are occurring with people that are staying inside. They actually would be healthier in some instances if they were outside, right? But
Right.
it's all trapped on the inside. And so for me, because I understand that this is something, I really believe in the next 2 to 3 years, there's not going to be, people are going to be made aware of this, because I think this has been something that's been known for a while and gradually been leaked out. It takes a while for our educational and scientific system to catch up. Because again, this goes back to doctors and scientists go to school to study one thing. And unless they're continuously trying to do something else, then no one's educated on it. So for me, it was so important to like connect the dots so that everything was connected for people, that it became a life mission. It really did. And no, I don't get paid to give my opinion. I actually have never, I don't accept money as a health coach or life coach, because that's not my path. Like, my path is to educate and to try to create solutions for governments and for people. But some of those solutions are so easy. They go back to what you do. They're simple. And here's the oddest thing. You're right. When you tell someone a simple solution, such as high doses of vitamin C, if they don't have heavy metals in the vitamin C, and there's not fungus, because I don't know if you know this, vitamins and minerals can hang on to heavy metals and fungus, bacteria, and viruses like leaves and plants can. So you're eating something and it's in that, right? So one of my passions has been, that people don't know about me, is really the food process, the farming process, because of where I grew up, making sure we're cleaning every single thing from mold and mycotoxins and everything, because it's everywhere. And I feel like a lot of these autoimmune disorders and diseases are a combination of mycotoxins, mycoplastics, mold, and parasites. And yes, bacteria and fungus are an issue, but we can fight those. Our human body is equipped. These other things, we've got to put more attention. And a lot of it is really the prevention or the detoxification or cleaning, not just inside the body, but everywhere, right? That's why the home is so important. And you are so right. People will die in their home of a disease or autoimmune disorder, and because of something that's in the home, and because a doctor may tell them they're crazy and they're imagining it, then they're scared to say anything, because as humans, we want acceptance. We want people to think what we're doing is the right thing. And instead, what we've got to realize is our bodies and our opinion matters. We're more important, and we have to clean out our bodies, and we have to do it on the outside and the inside. And I say it all the time, your skin is your largest organ. So if you have mold in the air or around you in a home, if people are always worried about their mouth or their eyes, what about their skin? It's going in everywhere. And again, I don't want people to be alarmed. They need to take the simple steps in their life to know their body is important. Yes, some of those are expensive to do the filtration systems, but so is buying a sofa or buying a chair. And it's a sofa or a chair. It means nothing. A human being has emotion and intellectual thought processes and love, and I mean, everything attached. So you have to put more money into taking care of your body and getting rid of the things that you shouldn't be around in your home or in the air or in the water, then you're worried about buying a sofa. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. You've made so many good points. I don't know where to start, but I think one of the earlier threads that I wanted to pull was, you may remember this very popular scientific term, the solution, or statement, I should say, the solution to pollution is dilution, right?
yeah,
Well, you're talking about it, being in these homes and how these homes impact people, and it's far more drastic than outside. Well, of course, there's a higher volume of air outside than there is inside, right? And with that being said, if you think about like how our housing has really changed over the years, right? Our houses are tighter and tighter than they were 50 years ago, right? The houses, they're built differently. We used to have balloon framing. There was actually air gaps between our exterior walls and our interior walls. We don't have that. We build right on top of the exterior wall. And so any water migration that comes in, or humidity, et cetera, gets trapped, and it starts to allow for mold to grow, for bacteria to grow inside our walls. We see this happen time and time again. And so, we are going on this path of this net zero energy efficiency, which I think it's a noble thing. We just got to think about the occupants inside. And
Absolutely.
right now we've charged ahead down that path without thinking about the occupants inside. And I think that's something that's rearing its ugly head. And as you pointed out, over the next couple of years, as we become more and more aware, this is one of those things that we're going to say, oops,
I
on,
forgot about that. I know.
and
That's
have
so
to revert
true.
back to. There's the other thing that you said was really interesting is we talk about obviously air exchange and having that exchange of air, but I think there are so many people out there, right, that just don't have any sort of reality on the air that they're breathing, and to me, I think it's because they see through the air, right? So it's
Yeah.
not even on your radar, right? And so when you start talking about the simple things in life, like, hey, the air you breathe is really important, and the water you drink is really important. The food fundamentally, I think it's easy to latch onto, but it's just like, you're telling me the air that I breathe can impact my health. How could that be? And I think that's the hardest thing to overcome, because I think the air is invisible. You see through it. And unless you really sat near a window on a sunny day and you saw the ray of light refract off all the dust in your air,
Yeah.
right? And what's in that dust, all the things that are so small that you can't even see,
Mhm.
that's where it really becomes interesting. And so I think, it'd be great, if people did kind of jump on the bandwagon, because as you pointed out, I mean, these are real things that are hurting people. And, I don't want to say this, it just happens to be a true thing. We have never been sicker than we are today.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I had a podcast 3 weeks ago and I said that statement, it was true then, it's true now. And it's not getting any better. Statistically speaking, we're watching this decline and decline and decline. And you made another really good point around, the money we invest. If I had to change my roof, right, and that cost, for some people, 20,000, 50,000, it doesn't matter what it costs, depends on the size of the roof. At that point, if I don't have a solid roof, right, what's the point of living in that house? It's just going to be raining on me. And so, we have to think about, what are we spending money on, and where are we really, for us, where are we deciding the value is, right? Because sure, a new sofa, maybe that costs a few $1,000s. An air purifier, maybe that, a really good one, maybe that costs a few $1,000s to put onto the HVAC system. At the same time, me personally, knowing what I know, if I have to choose between the two, I'm buying the air purifier,
Yeah.
right, over the sofa. But, these are rational decisions that people have to make. And, the being the adverse effect of this, which is basically doing nothing and just saying, I can never afford this, there's nothing I can do about it. Well, that's not a position of power that you want to put yourself in, because at that point, you're never going to take action and be in control of your health. And honestly, it's when it comes to money, financing, and budgeting, these are skill sets you can learn, right? I mean, I had to learn it, to start a business and to take this business to a level where I can help more people. I had to throw myself into it. I'm not an accountant, but I had to teach myself how money works and how to budget and how to finance. And as a result, I can decide what's important and what's not. And I think everybody listening to this has that same power.
They do. They do. I do know, like, people ask me, how do I pay for things when I can't, I don't have the money to buy clothes all the time. And I'm like you, I simply say there's ways to do that. You have to figure out what's important. For example, going to McDonald's and spending $10 to $15 on a meal is not an effective way to spend money or to eat for nutritional value, right? So you just have to determine what is so important to my life. And there's different types of things, and there's different budgets for this. You know that you can use with air filters, or water filtration systems, which again, it goes back to another issue that we have, having that in our water. But I think almost everyone now, again, you can't provide, it's like I work on pharmaceutical, nutraceutical. I focus right now on natural things because I don't like the side effects, like I said, from a lot of the things that I worry about people are taking. But I do know I can't provide everything I've worked on for every single person in the world. But what I can do is I can start foundations. Like we have the Rahm Foundation, where if people really need something and they apply, we've been able to take care of a lot of different needs. And we are open to people that need air filtration systems or water filtrations. We can't give it to everyone, but we've created a component that we can help people that don't have the funds to help their health as well. And I think that is on us as a society and as humanity to help each other. You know, we don't mind giving someone a car, but we're not thinking about their lungs. And again, I know this sounds ridiculous to people, but again, the truth is your body is the most important thing for your soul, for your life to be here in existence. You have to take care of it. And it's not a joke about the air quality. A lot of people do not respect the World Health Organization anymore because of all the stuff that's happened. But years ago, like in the 70s and 80s, they started making statements about our air quality and about inside air and about the mold and about the toxins. They produced reports. Now, Michael, what happened to those reports? That's another story, right? Because what you said was so significant, connecting the dots that were, you're worried about the carbon footprint, but are you talking about the individual person and their overall health, or just even the health of their breathing, right? Their ability to live. Because if you don't breathe, and by the way, just so your audience knows, breathing, like the air, the light, they have colors that are produced when you look at them scientifically. You just can't see it with the human eye right away, right? I wish sometimes I could share with people the education and the things that I've seen as it pertains to this topic, because you can look at air quality. You can test air quality. There is a visibility to it. It's just the human eye is not seeing that, right? But again, we're also not seeing our cells talk inside our bodies, and they do. And let me use an example. If the lungs can't breathe, then the cellular health of the lungs are communicating with the other organs in the body, including the brain and the kidneys and the liver, and they're not functioning as well either. So I'd like for people to understand, when you're talking air quality, you're not just talking breathing, you're talking the overall cellular health and organ health of the body. And without that health, you can't survive. So it's very important that this is a topic that we don't run away from, because it's not going to get better. We have to take care of our own lives. So when people say they're worried about politics, or they're worried about what's happening with the economy, here's the good news we can tell people. Worry about your body and your health first. Take it in your own hands. Do things like worrying about the water you drink, or the breath that you have and the air that you're breathing, because then you impact your life. Then you can work towards a plan to impact others and impact the overall population of the world. But you have to start with yourself. And that's why everyone's individual life is so important, and they have to understand this connection. And I call it a continuum of life that you have to understand. And you also have to understand the inflammatory cascade that's inside the body, which is heavily controlled by the air you breathe, by what you drink, by the food that you're putting inside your body. Those three things are so important to everything. And those three things, you can't put a price tag on it. And a lot of people don't understand it, but they have to start understanding. So you educating people is very important. And I feel like there's most talks that you'll hear me give, I'm including this in the talks that I'm formulating. I even worked on a patent to clean out, the mold and the mycotoxins in every leaf and every seed. and every plant, trying to get rid of it, because understanding that when you have this mold, the parasites are everywhere. And the problem is a lot of things that have been developed by scientists are toxic, right? So developing things we can give people that won't hurt them, it has really been my goal, because a lot of things that will kill a fungus or kill a parasite or a virus or bacteria can also harm your body. So it's become my life mission to develop natural things that don't harm the body and instead help the body get better and better every day.
Well, I so appreciate that. And the message you gave was just so uplifting. And so thank you for that, for the inspiration, because it is, it can be sometimes a bit alarming, to see things go the way they're going. And, it's hard not to think about, um, feeling not in control. And so you're right. I mean, taking actions for yourself and starting to also try to help others like that, that's how we overcome that. I wanted to pivot to the patents and everything else you're working on. What, obviously you're still giving these talks, you're still kind of spreading awareness, which is really, really impactful and so appreciative. But what else are you working on to help solve some of these problems? Tell us about some of the solutions and how people can find them.
So in the year that COVID hit the United States, because it was actually, in other parts of the of the world before it was announced in the United States. So when it hit, I had worked on formulas that were natural products that could help with cleaning and detoxifying the body. My goal was never to make claims. My goal was, I had worked in so many countries. I had received so many vaccinations because of my travel to those countries, working on different pharmaceutical, biotech, and healthcare projects, that I, as a person with cancer and Lyme disease, I wanted to get the heavy metals out of my body, understanding, again, the fungus and parasites and how all of that was attached. So I worked on formulations, wrote patents, developed some of those in the United States and some internationally, and have continued to work on those to the point that now I think 7 are approved. And of those 7, there's thousands of claims in different areas. And most of those include things like antibacterial, antifungal components, antiparasitic, because again, your goal is to provide a better air, water, and food quality. So a lot of the focus that I have is on that, understanding that it's a seed or a plant that we use not just in nutraceuticals, but also biologics and pharmaceuticals. We're just taking out certain components and we're adding a synthetic. So my goal was to not use synthetics and to use natural things to try to try to provide like insecticidal. Like right now, if you put something on so you don't get fleas or ticks, a lot of that's toxic. Or if you put a sunscreen on for your skin, it's toxic. So my goal was to take the toxins out by developing environmental, pharmaceutical, biotech, and nutraceutical components to that. I've been able to manufacture things and to do trademarks and patents that are solutions, not just in the United States, but internationally. And some of those have been launched through the Root brands. Others of those have been licensed out and are continuing to be developed. I'll use another example. I did a coffee where I cleaned the beans because I knew that coffee has so much toxin and mold in it and mycotoxins that even though coffee beans are good and can even cause, the bad cells to die and the good cells to be better, the problem is if it's holding on to that mold or that toxin and you're drinking it, then you're getting that, right? So I developed a coffee with a cup score of 91 that has no mycotoxins, fair trade, organic, made in non-GMOs, made sure everything was stabilized. Less than 1% of the coffee in the world has that type of rating. It's kind of a monarch. Nothing else has been developed that way. And if you said to me, why does coffee matter? Again, it goes back to everything you eat or drink matters. Everything you breathe matters, right? And so all of these have been aimed at that. And so through the process, I even did some patents with oil, gas, and hydrogen by cleaning out oil, gas, and hydrogen and detoxing it to make it go longer, up to 30 times longer. So I've really focused on different areas. I'm so glad you said what you said. I'm trying to connect the dots. My focus is not the monetary value of that. My focus is the value to humanity that we can produce throughout the world. I would have retired by now if I was probably if I was smart. I don't know, but for
Or focused
me,
on the
or
money,
more,
right?
but for me, like I think every human being deserves to know this. Like I think we deserve to understand how important this is to our lives. I would say most people don't understand that when they go inside and they're breathing, they can get sick, right? They don't understand that the water that they're drinking, and honestly, it's too overwhelming to people to even probably focus on that. So again, by providing solutions that were natural, that became my main goal of trying to produce things throughout the world. And it's been recognized by certain areas of the government in the United States, as well as internationally. So even we started during COVID, that company grew from one country to over 90 with shipping and logistics and everything else. I wish I would have focused a little bit more on the United States, to be honest. I've focused so much internationally because of the desire of different people in different positions actually asking me to come in and educate their governments or their people or help them with projects. And some of those projects I can't talk about, and some of them I can. But again, my goal is always the same mission, and that is to do something good that is a legacy that we leave for our children's children. Because I could work on the Mars project or projects that go to the moon. As a scientist, there's lots of different projects you can take on. But my project I wanted aimed at the world that we live in now and how we can survive and evolve here, and we won't be extinguished. And we can evolve because we are smarter than mold and viruses, but we can't hide our head in the sand and act like none of this is happening. We have to address it, and then we have to deal with it. And that's what's so important. And so the products launched, they grew, like I said, to 90 countries. I went and did a lot of talking and speaking and educating, which is my passion. Once I've produced things, and I actually worked on stuff for COVID in the development round for the lungs, which would help get rid of viruses and mycotoxins in the lungs. And we had great success, but we weren't approved because most of the things that were approved were vaccines. So, this again, and one more thing to your audience, and again, I say this to people, I'm not on one side or the other. I'm really trying to be for humanity. But when you do get shots and you do have vaccines, some people want to get those and some people don't. And again, every human being should have the right to decide what they're doing with their body. But just so people know, fungus grows in that too. When you have a carrier that's a heavy metal, then the fungus will proliferate throughout the body. So you got to get rid of it. So I have worked on a lot of zeolites. My favorite product is at the Root Brands, but there's other products out there that are on the market that I worked on as well, to try to help in the manufacturing process, because my goal is not one in particular company or product. My goal, again, is humanity and us doing things that can improve that in different countries as well as in the United States. So this manufacturing in the United States, that with Trump and Kennedy and all the stuff that's happening, I've been very supported on that. And we are going to make an announcement on May 8th on some of the stuff that we're doing in that area in the United States.
Yeah, it's all really inspiring to see, everything you're talking about. I mean, I hope I can accomplish just a small percentage of what you're accomplishing in your life. I'm very inspired by everything you're doing and the solutions that you're bringing, towards humanity with that humanity first focus. And so please, we'd love to know where we can all support you. Please tell us, what the company's names are, the websites, and more importantly as well, where people can find you and connect with you.
You can find me at drchristinarahm.com, and we're all over social media. We are at the Root Brands is where the products are, and a lot of those were centered around antimicrobial, antibacterial, all the different things. I have to be very careful because we can't claim anything, and I say that all the time because it's natural. And DRC Ventures, I'm the CEO of that company. We have 29 companies under that that are in different places in development and commercialization, as well as patents and trademarks. And again, a lot of those companies, I think 8 of those companies, no, 12 of those companies are international as well at this point. And I am focused this year on the United States. That's what I will say, because it really has hit home to me that if we don't start in our backyard and manufacture, even though I'm sourcing products from all over the world and we're bringing economic development into those countries, it's important to me that we focus on this country and make it strong again.
That's so awesome. I just wanted to thank you again for your time today. I know you can be doing a lot of different things right now, so it really means a lot to me and everybody listening that you came on and shared your wisdom and expertise. I hope to have you on again soon, because there's a lot of wealth of knowledge that you have and a lot of different topics that we obviously could have expanded upon. But this was an amazing conversation, Dr. Christina Rahm, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'd love to have you on my podcast too. So I'll get with everyone and see if you can be on it. Ours is a big international audience, but it would open stuff to you as well. I really enjoyed today, and I love what you're doing. We're each the small piece of what we can accomplish, and everyone's so scared of like the negative and the bad side. But if you have the warriors on the good side that are working together to serve and lead, we can accomplish so much together. So there's not really room for jealousy. I tell people that all the time. We have so much that we can do together.
I couldn't agree more, and I'd be honored to join you on your podcast as well.